You're listening to a message from Gateway Church Geelong. We hope it blesses you. For more information about Gateway, visit gc.org.au.
Oh, thank you. Please be seated. It's always a joy and a pleasure to visit your beautiful country. As Phil said, we've been here a number of times, but it's always great, isn't it? It's always great. God has got his favourites. Obviously, it's you. Currently at home, it's like -10 and about 2 foot of snow, I think. Sad for them, really, isn't it? But we really have enjoyed our time here. We always look forward to coming. And what I love about the Australian people is you say it as it is. You don't sort of dress it up. You say it as it is. In fact, you shoot from the hip. And I just wonder this morning if we could just cut through, in the business of life, if we could just cut through the razzmatazz, the spiritual froth, the hype, all that stuff. If we could just strip it right back and be real with each other this morning, okay? Can we do that? Can I be really real with you this morning? Will you be really real with me this morning? That's what we want to do, isn't it? Can we just get real? Because I believe that God has got something for every single person that's here this morning. There's no mistakes here this morning. You're here this morning, and I really believe, as I've been praying this week, that God has got something for you. In fact, I had this picture of a room, a big room, similar sort of size to this. And in this room there were tables, right? And on these tables there was just piles and piles and piles of presents. And all these presents had a name on it. And one of these presents had your name on it, and your name on it, and your name on it, and your name on it. That's how I got this vision for this morning, that God has got something special for every single person that's here this morning. Whatever your need, whatever your call, whatever your situation, whatever circumstance you find yourself in this morning, God can meet that need. God can heal that disease. God can set you free. Whatever it is this morning, I believe God has it for you. If we'll just strip it right back and get real. Amen? You all look serious. They've all gone serious on me. Okay, so I'm here just to share my testimony. Obviously, I've got limited time, so if you want to find out the rest, it's in this book called Killing Time, which I know that are out there by the cafe. So if you need to get hold of one of these books, you'll find them out there. They cost you about $100, all right? I think they're $10, and if you want it signing, it'll be another $5. But honestly, the rest of the story is in that, so please do that. Imagine your worst nightmare. Imagine today, an ordinary day where you just wake up on an ordinary day, then suddenly you're arrested for the murder of a man you've never ever met. That's what happened to me a number of years ago. I'd recently resigned from the police force, really just trying to work out what I want to do in terms of a future career. Then suddenly I'm arrested for the murder of a man I'd never met. Taken away to the police station, interviewed by teams of top detectives, trying to extract a confession to a murder I knew nothing whatsoever about. And I thought, it's just a nightmare. I'm going to wake up in a minute and my life's just going to be back to normal. But the nightmare continued. That evening I was charged with the murder of this man. The following day I was taken off to the magistrate's court, whereupon I was remanded in custody to await a trial on this charge of murder. And I was remanded to a place called Risley Remand Centre in the south of Lancashire where I lived. Now, I've been there as a police officer many times, never ever expecting to go there myself, charged with such a terrible crime. So I was gripped by fear in the back of this van thinking, what's going to happen to me when I get to Risley? I don't know what it's like in Australia, but in England, criminals don't like police. Is it the same here? Is it? How do you know? Anyway, so I arrived at Risley. I was locked away in a cubicle to wait to be processed in the system. After a number of hours, my turn came up, and I was taken to the reception area, whereupon I was ordered to strip naked. I wouldn't be requiring my clothes whilst I was in their custodial care. So I stood there in my nakedness, feeling very vulnerable, very degraded, very humiliated. Then they said to me, "You'll no longer be known as Noel Fellows. Now you're 81168 Fellows." So everything I valued in life was slowly but surely being stripped away, layer by layer by layer by layer. I'd lost my name, I'd lost my dignity, but I'd lost that one thing that so many lives have been so willingly sacrificed for in our nation, in the mother of all democracies. I'd lost my personal freedom, yet in a system and a country that says you're innocent until you're proved guilty. Then I was ordered off to the bath area to take a bath before seeing the medical officer, which is part of this process. And that's when my worst fears were realized. I was attacked by a number of inmates because the prison officer told them of my former career. And I was being beaten up, and I was crying out for help, but it seemed like no one wanted to listen till eventually the prison officers came and rescued me from my assailants. Then I was taken off to the medical officer, who in his wisdom decided I should go to the hospital wing, obviously for the injuries, and secondly for my own protection. I thought they were a little late on the second count, but that's the system. Now, what I'm trying to do is to paint this verbal picture of the reality of what it was like to enter into that system. You see, all that happened within 48 hours of my life. 48 hours earlier, my life was in some sort of order. Now my life is in absolute turmoil. But life can be like that, can't it? It can just be like that. Suddenly, another suddenly. Now, if I asked you this morning to get out your electronic diaries, like most of you have had nowadays, I could confidently predict that you'd have all sorts of things written in them, wouldn't you? All sorts of appointments, dentists, doctors, holidays, birthdays, whatever. We fill our diaries, don't we? We just fill our diaries, don't we? Day by day, week by week, year by year. But if I said to you this morning, what dates have you penciled in 2018 for disaster? Is there any takers? No. Why is that? Well, because it's never going to happen to us, is it? But the reality of life is stuff just happens, doesn't it? Because life is full of suddenlies. Suddenly you fall in love. Do you remember that? Anybody? Men, do you remember that? The wobbly knees? Oh. He does. Or, suddenly you're a parent. You're a couple, and suddenly you're a parent, aren't you? Suddenly, a baby's born. Suddenly, somebody dies. Suddenly. Life is full of suddenlies. Nothing's going to happen to us, but it does, doesn't it? And we can carry that stuff through our lives, just as I was carrying that stuff. Are you still carrying the pain or disaster that happened in your life? But I thought, well, if I can survive the daily menu of violence and intimidation, at least when the trial comes along, the truth will emerge. Because I still believed in our judicial system. The trial came along some months later. I was taken off to court, Lancaster Castle, Lancaster Assizes, whereupon I met my QC for the first time. In England, if you're charged with a capital offence, the only person who can defend you is a Queen's Counsel. They're the ones with the wigs, okay? Just so you know. And his opening gambit to me was, "Noel, have you considered pleading guilty to manslaughter?" I thought, wow, this is the guy defending me, for goodness sake. So for all you English students here in Australia, I told him a few home truths in broad Anglo-Saxon. And he decided to do his best for me. And then day after day after day after day, I just listened to lie upon lie upon lie upon lie. I could not believe that one human being would knowingly lie against another human being, considering the seriousness of the charge that was against me. I was a spectator to everything. I was a victim of malicious lies. Perhaps that's your experience. You're still carrying the pain. You're a victim of malicious lies. The trial concluded and led underneath the dock to await the decision of the jury, a memory that never fades, the longest hours I ever waited, it seemed, in my life. And whilst I was there, in this, because remember, it's a castle, it's a medieval castle, and the cellar's like a cell with stone walls, no natural light, big door, and there was a little hatch, and the hatch opened, and the prison officer said, "Fellows, your mother sent you this book." I picked it up as a Bible, and I thought, what's my mum sent me a Bible for goodness sake? Here's me fighting for my life, and my mother sends me a Bible. Now, my mother had been a Christian as far back as I could remember as a child, seemed to live the life that a Christian should do. But my concept of God was there might be a God, there might not be a God. Didn't understand evolution anywhere. Maybe that's where you're at this morning. But I was so desperate, I thought I'd try anything, because I remember as a small child, I'm one of 7 children, and my father was a seaman, a merchant seaman. He used to go off, come back, give my mum a baby, go off, come back, give my mum a baby, go off, come back, give my mum a baby. And after 7, it got very boring. But very often, as he was away, the money wouldn't be there. The money wouldn't come. I remember passing my mother's bedroom one day. I was probably 7 or 8 years old. And my mother was on her knees, and she was crying. And she was asking God for food for her children. You don't forget stuff like that, the detail of that. And I was so desperate, I thought I'd try anything. So I got hold of this Bible, got on my knees, said to God, "God, you know I haven't done it. You know I haven't done it. You convince the jury, wherever they are, that I haven't done it. I'll do anything for you. Amen." That's the deal. Seemed like a good deal to me. Eventually, the jury came back. I was led onto the dock, and I was found guilty of manslaughter. And all I remember hearing was 7 years, 7 years. You'll go to prison for 7 years. And something died within me there and then. I had no future expectation of a quality of life. And I made a conscious decision at that point. There was no such thing as God. There was no such thing as God. Where was this God my mother had told me back as a child, you know? This God of love, this God of justice, this God of truth. I was telling the truth and no one wanted to listen to it. And I became violently opposed to people who call themselves Christians from that point forward. I was led away, and now to all intents and purposes, I'm a convicted killer, led away to travel to Walton Prison in Liverpool. Don't know if you know anything about Liverpool. Liverpool's quite a rough place on the outside. Don't ever visit on the inside. And I was taken along H wing, which was a punishment wing, being dragged along the wing because I was still protesting my innocence. The more I protested my innocence, the more the system rebuked me for it, because the system's geared towards the guilty. It's not geared towards the innocent. And at that time, put in a punishment cell for 28 days, on a cycle of 28 days, just a cell, no natural light, nothing to read, nobody to speak to, just you and this thing going round and round, trying to come to terms with what's happening. And your thoughts become play bricks in a toyland of madness. I just can't believe what was happening to me. Eventually, and it was the days as well, it was in the days of bread and water, so you didn't get a really nice glass like this. You got a jug of water and a piece of bread in the morning, and you got the same at night, and that was it for 28 days. A new way of fasting. And the idea was, It was to break you. It was to break your will and make you come to terms with this sentence and conform to the system. The whole idea was to break you and break you into the system. Anyway, I survived that and then eventually released onto the wings of the prison. But again, as soon as I got into a cell, again, more violence, not because now I've been convicted of killing somebody, but still because I was an ex-policeman. So back into the hospital wing, back into isolation. I'd gone through all the things that were open to me in terms of appeals, you know, avenues of hope that turned into cul-de-sacs of despair. Then I realized I couldn't beat the system. But I was in such an emotional and depressed state. Depression's got a way of wrapping its arms around you and just dragging you further and further down into a pit. And I noticed there's a conduit on the ceiling. I thought, well, the only way out of this is to hang myself, kill myself. At least then, you know, there'd be no more violence and no more intimidation. But more importantly, there'd be no more thinking about it. And so I tore a sheet up, made a noose, and I thought, do I want to do this? Yes, no, and I jumped. I pulled the conduit out of the ceiling. I thought, what is it about me? Whatever I do, it seems to go wrong. But something snapped at that point in terms of, I thought, hang on a minute, Noel, you mustn't let them destroy you as a person. You must just hold on to something, just grab hold of something. And I thought, well, I'll just grab hold of perhaps one day the truth will emerge. And perhaps that's you this morning. You know, that you go through this phase of suffering from mood swings and depression, and you just can't stop it. It's like this red mist appears and it just comes upon you and drags you down. Well, I understand that. I've been there. Then I realized I was just a number in the system, a Mr. Nobody. You know, and a small cancerous seed of hatred and embitterment had started to take root very deep inside me. Shortly after that, I was transferred to Wakefield Prison in Yorkshire, which isn't very good when you come from Lancashire. The War of the Roses continues over in the UK. But it was and still is the most secure prison in Europe. And at that time, about 800 inmates, about 700 of which were doing life sentences. So it was like going from the frying pan into the fire. And again, more violence, more intimidation, and all that sort of stuff. It's a human jungle. Only the fittest and the strongest survive. And so, at that point, I had a life controlled by fear. I was fearful every moment, every day. I was so sensitive to what was left of me, right of me, front of me, behind me. I got so sensitive to that. And it's something that's never left me, just for self-preservation. And you'll read in the book, you know, some of the violence, some of the, I don't mean teeth knocked out, my head stitched. You can read all about that stuff in the book. But it's a terrible thing. And perhaps that's you here this morning. You know, you have a fear-controlled life. Your life is controlled by fear. Perhaps it's just fear of failure. Perhaps it's fear of abuse, physical, emotional. Perhaps you've been abused in those sort of areas. Or even a fear of death. You know, fear is a terrible thing, isn't it? It controls you. It does that. And while I was there, everything was screaming for revenge inside of me. I was consumed by hatred and embitterment. This cancerous seed just grew and grew and grew till it just grew to such an extent. And I decided I had to do something about it, realized I couldn't beat the system. The only way I could beat the system was try and use the system for my own advantage, eventually when I was released. So there were three elements decided I needed to embark on this fight back campaign. I needed to be mentally stable, I needed to be physically fit, I needed to be educationally qualified. So I tried to get my head together, which wasn't easy. And then I went down the gym, started getting fit, started pumping iron, they call it now, don't they? Pumping iron. All the hatred and embitterment. And the more I did of that, the bigger and stronger it became. The bigger and stronger it became, the more the room the guys give me on the landings. I thought, this is good, keep going. And after about a year, I was walking around Wakefield Prison like Rambo and chained. And that's when I decided to pay my respects to the people who've been doing it to me. Now, I went into prison. I wasn't a violent person, but I became an incredibly violent person, you know, and that's what it was. And then another realization, everything that I despised about the system, I saw I've been sucked into the very thing that I despised. I'd become a part of the very thing I didn't want to be a part of. And I went down the education block and I did educational qualifications. Finished with me and 5 others were the first inmates ever allowed to do Open University. So I did a degree in philosophy and logic. So I put all my efforts into this Fight Back campaign. And eventually you come up for parole, and like Australia, you know, you serve a certain amount of time. But if you've been convicted of killing somebody in our country, then they've got to have all these different reports on you. And all these reports are made up of all these ists that we have in our society now: sociologists, psychiatrists, psychologists. I think they should all be in prison anyway, but that's just my opinion. And then it culminates by you seeing the psychiatrist at the end of it who gets all these reports, and he does his final report. So he was hid behind this big table, and he said to me, "The thing is, Noel, you've never admitted to yourself that you've done it." I said, "Really?" He said, "Really?" He said, "All you've got to do is speak it out, then you'll hear it, then you'll believe you, then you'll believe it. You've been a model prisoner, by that I meant I'm being caught, and you'll be out." I said, "Really?" He said, "Really?" I said, "Well, there's just one problem." He said, "What's that?" I said, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it." His whole attitude changes at this point. He said, "Can you imagine us letting someone like you loose on the streets who never admitted themselves that done it?" He said, "I wouldn't like to meet you on a dark night in a dark alley." I said, "Oh, I'd love to meet you." So I didn't get parole. But that's the price I had to pay to stand in the truth. See, the truth will always cost you something. The question is this morning, what price are you willing to pay? This truth will cost you everything. If you want to be part of this truth, it will cost you everything. You've got to give your life over to it. See, truth is often offensive to us. It challenges us. Often we don't want to own it. We don't want to wear it, because truth very often demands change. And there's some inherent thing in our lives that has such reluctance to change. But truth often demands change. The question is, what price? And we have a reluctance to change. It demands effort and it demands commitment. And in the New Testament, in John's Gospel, chapter 8, verse 32, the second part of it says, you know, that you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Now, I concluded when I was studying philosophy and logic, I came to a conclusion years before I became a Christian that ultimately there can only be one truth. And everybody here at some point in your life, whether it's happened or not, it will happen at some point in your life, will come to this. One day you'll think, where did I come from? Why am I here? Where am I going? Everybody. So I concluded when I was studying that there can only be one truth. And if that was true, if that truth is true, then the truth must stand the test of time. This truth continues to stand the test of time. You can look back through millenniums. You can look back through history over thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Empires have come, empires have gone. British was one of them. You know, the Roman Empire, the Greeks, all that sort of stuff. They've come, they've gone, they've come, they've gone, they've come, they've gone. But this truth has stood throughout it all. and still is the best-selling book in the world. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So truth equals freedom. Therefore, there is no freedom outside of truth. There's no freedom outside of truth. There's no real freedom outside of truth. And God, my God, is the one and only true God that operates in truth. He only operates in truth. And it says in the book of Hebrews 11, verse 6, my God, our God, is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. Diligently seek him, just as Pastor Lee was talking about this morning. So God's given me a word. That's why I wanted Pastor Phil to talk about our encounter in 2002. You know, it's wonderful to have seen how the Gateway Church has developed over the years, but I believe God's given me a word here this morning for you, for the next day's truths. I was really excited when I heard last week about your prayer and fasting, and then next Sunday's the vision meeting. I thought, wow, it's all in this time. Timing is the thing, isn't it? You know, and so I believe that God is looking to build. I was asking Pastor Phil again about what's a platoon. I haven't been in the army, but I know Pastor Phil has, and he was saying it's a number, it's a small number of soldiers. And I believe that God is looking to build a platoon of people here this morning, people who are members of this church, right? Is looking to build a platoon of people, of soldiers. Actually, of the picture I had was of foot soldiers that will stand for his truth, that will fight for his truth, that will take his truth to this community and to this nation. He wants to do it amongst these people here. The question is this morning, do you want to be part of that platoon? Do you want to be one of those foot soldiers? If that's you this morning, and remember, you're not making any response to me, because I'm gone. 3 weeks, I'm out of here, right? I'm out of here, right? It's a response to God, right? That's what he's looking to do. That's part of this whole thing that's coming next week. I don't know anything that's coming next week, but I know this is a part of it, okay? So if that's you this morning, you say, I want to declare, I want to be one of those foot soldiers who will stand for his truth, guard his truth, and take this truth to his name. If that's you this morning, I would like you to stand. Just stand wherever you are. I'd just like Pastor Lee and Pastor Naomi to come forward. I want you to look at your people. I don't know your people, you do, yeah? Okay. Okay, so you can see these people, okay? Now then, if you're not a member of this church, you're a guest here, or whatever, wherever you're from, and you say, you know, wherever I come from, I want to be one of them foot soldiers when I get back to my church, all right? Then you can stand. You just stand right now? Good, okay. Thank you. Just hold that thought, because I've got to go back to something I wrote down here now, which is part of this whole thing. Mahatma Gandhi said this: be the change you want to see in the world. It's an amazing statement, that. But I believe that God gave me this word for you, right? Be the change that you want to see in your church. Be the change you want to see in your marriage. Be the change you want to see in relationships. Be the change you want to see in your workplace. Be the change you want to see in your community. Be the change you want to see in your community. You can be the change. You can change the atmosphere. You can change anything if you will be the change. It's all coming next week. It's all coming. And I want you, if you're members of this church here at Gateway, this is what I believe God is calling for you to do. You are going to be part of this platoon. Encourage Pastor Lee and Naomi. Get behind them and behind the vision that God has given them for 2018, progressing forward. Progressing forward. Let them know of the decision and commitment you made to God today. They've seen you, but let them know. I want you to know, I want you to let them know through a phone call, through a conversation, through an internet, whatever they call it, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so be the change, okay? Going back to this, let me just finish with this little bit here, which finishes this part. Okay, look at me, please. Look at Pastor Lee and Naomi. Just look at them. Okay. It says in Matthew 16, verse 19, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. We agree on that. Amen? Okay, look at me, okay? I just bind a spirit of fear and timidity over every single person standing right now in the name of Jesus. In the name of Jesus. In the name of Jesus. And I loose a spirit of faith and boldness. Faith and boldness. Faith and boldness in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Is that a done deal? Excellent. Good. Don't forget, church, that's a commitment you made to God. Here's your platoon leaders right here. They're going to equip you. They're going to train you. You're going to be absolutely amazing, amazing foot soldiers if you'll just have a teachable spirit, if you just get the training, and if you'll just take that word today, from now on, faith and boldness. Amen? I was released from prison, which is pretty obvious, really, isn't it? Now on the outside, I remember coming on the outside and thinking, it was a cold January morning, and I thought, wow, that's it, I've survived. Now on the outside, I looked a very together person. I was tall, I was strong, I was presentable, I was educated, but on the inside, I'd all been destroyed as a human being. Everything I valued in life had been stripped away. I was full of hatred and embitterment. I was full of fear. I had a very low self-esteem. Actually, there was a little boy inside a man's body, desperate to belong, desperate to be part of a family, desperate to be loved, desperate to be listened to. All going on the inside. I look out here today, some of you look very sophisticated people. You're saying, don't look at me. But we live in this world of externalism. We live in this world of imagery, don't we? It's all about image, isn't it? But what's going on the inside of your life today? What cell have you been locked away in for years? See, God can see it all. He wants you to come into the fullness and the beauty of what He created and what He loves. Full of insecurity I was. And we have this, it's interesting when you come through the church door. I was watching people this morning, you have a welcome team, right? And you come in, classic. How are you today? Wonderful. You could have had the worst week in your life. You get to church, how are you today? Wonderful. Live from the pit of hell, isn't it? Why is that? Because of imagery and everything else, we hide behind masks. Masks that protect us. Masks of convenience. We change masks to change the situation we find ourselves in. Where God's saying, I want you to jettison the mask. I want you to come into the fullness, the reality, the beauty of what I created you for and with. Can we be real this morning? Can we be real this morning? Will you get real this morning? Jettison the mess. You're in good hands. God sees it all. He wants you to find the real you. See, the way you handle the hurts of your past will always determine your future. The way you handle the hurts of your past will always determine your future. You can never be free. You can never be free whilst you're still living a lie. It's not possible. Truth equals freedom. Anyway, I went to get a job, and when I went to get a job, I get interviewed. I must have interviewed quite well. And inevitably, the question would come, where do you get the qualifications? Wakefield Prison came the reply. Oh, no, thank you very much. We won't be requiring your services. And that's when I realized that to serve the second sentence on the outside, I was still a convicted killer. So I couldn't get a job. I could only get jobs labouring. So more rejection heaped on all the other problems I had on top of everything else. And just trying to survive on the outside was just as hard as it was on the inside. Except on the outside, I had access to alcohol, I had access to drugs. So I started to abuse alcohol and drugs. The alcohol and the drugs weren't the problem. I was just trying to anesthetize a deeper pain I didn't know what to do with. Full of rejection, serving the second sentence. But then my life took on a brand new chapter. There's a guy and a little lad in church, his son in church, and his dad said, what does it mean when the preacher takes his watch off? He says, absolutely nothing. How many minutes have we got left? Are we all right? Is everybody all right? Sorry, I haven't gone on. My life took on a brand new chapter, and I bumped into chapter 12. Ladies, just get the book for that chapter. Chapter 12 is a great chapter. It's called The Remarkable Woman. Men, I'm going to tell you, this is how you introduce your wives, right? This is my wife, Coral, in whom I am well pleased. Stand up, Coral. That's Coral standing up. It's amazing, isn't it? My wife is a remarkable woman. And we went out together. We started this relationship. I fell in love with Coral. And Coral gave me great security, understanding, stability. We've developed our relationship. Eventually, a year, 18 months later, we were married. We built a life together. We built a home together. We have a family together. And so this new chapter was really exciting and really good. I had to love this wonderful woman. But I still had the nightmares. I used to dread the nighttime. As soon as I went to bed, put my head on the pillow, bang, I was back in prison amongst all that terrible stuff. And so I was leading a double life. And the double life was, I had these nightmares at night. I went to work at work, but nobody knew of my background. Nobody knew because I'd moved so many miles away from where this crime happened. So I lived in this tension all the time. If my employers find out, I'll be sacked. It'll threaten my marriage. I'll lose my house. We'll lose the kids. So you live in this tension all the time. So more and more defenses were there. I built walls to protect myself. I loved Coral, but I trusted me. And I used to go into these terrible depressions where it all got on top of me. And I'd just get a bucket and some nails and a hammer and alcohol and drugs and just go up in the bedroom, nail myself in for 2 or 3 days at a time. Which brings a whole new meaning to the word withdraw, doesn't it? And people have said to Coral, I don't remember some of those dark days, but Coral obviously does. But said to Coral, did you ever think about divorcing him? She said, no, but murder crossed my mind a few times. And so I was heading the wrong way, and I was heading towards an early death, really. You can read all about that in the book. And then one day we'd been out, one Friday night, my parents were babysitting for my brother's children and my brother Paul and his wife, and me and Coral, we went out for a drink in a pub, and we had a great night. Came home, and my mother was babysitting for his 2 children. Got home to drop him off, and my mum was there. My mum said to me, "How are you, Noel?" I said, "Fine, we had a great night, had a few drinks, great night." And Mum said, "Yeah, but how are you really?" Because mothers just press in, don't they? And I said, "I've just told you, Mum." No, she said, "How are you?" I said, "The nightmares, they get worse. I get beaten up, I get stabbed, I die, I fall back into this blackness. I'm so familiar with it now, I think I'll wake up in the morning." And my mother said to me, "I think God's talking to you." I said, "Really?" I had a word with him a few years ago. He wasn't around then. And my mother said to me, "I think God's saying you're spiritually dead." I said, "Oh, it's fine for you, Mum, but I live in the reality of my life and my situation. I don't need a crutch to lean on." But for the first time in my life, I listened to what my mother believed in. I went home and thought, it's fine for my mum, it's not for me. You might be thinking that right now. And then a couple of weeks later, I saw my brother John walking down the path, who I affectionately called John the Baptist. He was a Christian, went to a Baptist church, just think the right thing to call him. Me and my brother John, we had this agreement. If he came to our house and talked about God or talked about Jesus, he got kicked out. That was the deal. And I was always kicking him out because he couldn't shut him up about it. And anyway, I thought, oh no, John, anyway, I opened the door. "What can you do for you, John?" He ruffled in his coat. He said, "God's told me to give you this, a Bible." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, come in," put it on the table. His blood came back to his face. It was amazing. And he went, and I looked at his Bible and thought, great, what a great challenge. I'll never open that, never. I took it upstairs, put it on the bedside table, you know what you do? And every time he used to go in the bedroom, this Bible used to seek me out and stare at me. And I thought, I'll never open that, never. Until one day I came home, it had gone. So I shouted down to my wife, like husbands do, "Darling, where have you put my Bible?" Well, words to that effect anyway. And Coral said, "You'll never open that." I put it in a cupboard, so I took it out and put it back where I left it, like men do. And anyway, I flicked it open, and it opened at Isaiah 53. I read a few lines and made no sense whatsoever, so I put it down again. But every night I used to go back and read it, and I think, I know it's a conspiracy. My mum's talking to my brother. They're trying to get me around to their crazy way of thinking. It's a conspiracy. Some of you are thinking that right now as well. And whoever invited you here this morning, blackmailed you to come here this morning, promised you something if you did come here this morning, they love you that much that they want you to have what they have in that relationship with Jesus Christ. That's how much my family loved me. That's how much my brother loved me. So much so that I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll speak to my youngest brother, Roger, who's also a Christian. It's getting worse, isn't it? And so I spoke to Roger. So what do you think? He said, "I think God's talking to you." I said, "What is it about you people? I can't hear anything." I said, "If it's true about this Jesus, Roger, I'd love to meet him. I'd love to bend his ear for a few minutes after what I've enjoyed in my life." Roger said, "If you're really serious, Noel, he'll meet you." I said, "Where is he?" He said, "Well, he's alive and well in a church." As soon as he mentioned the word church, big turn off. But I thought he knew I would rise to his challenge to disprove his theory. So came home. It was on a Saturday, I remember. It was in the days where women used to make cakes. And so I said to Coral, "Going to church tomorrow, going to find God." "All right, love," she said. So the next day we went to this church. God wasn't there, so we came home again. So I said to Coral, "We'll give it another go next week in another church, shall we?" "All right, love," she said. So we went to the other church. In fact, in this church, they didn't bury the dead. They stood them in the pews to make it look busy. It was one of them sort of churches. Don't be offended at that. I'm stripping them out. I'm being real, okay? That's what I said, right? I wasn't looking for religion. I wasn't looking for traditionalism. I wasn't looking for smells and bells. If it's true about this Jesus, I was desperate to meet him. Desperate to meet him. And perhaps that's you this morning. You're desperate to meet him. You don't want all the other stuff. You're just desperate. If it's true, I just want to meet him. See, we are the world's full of religions. Religion's man's best shot at trying to reach God. Jesus Christ is God's way of reaching down and saving his creation and mankind. You're looking for what I was looking for. I said to Carl, you wasted 3 hours of my life looking for God. I went and see Ray. So which church do you go to? He told me, I said, I'm going to come there. I'm going to disprove your theory. He said, come anytime. And some weeks later, we went to his church. First thing I noticed, you might have noticed, a visit this morning. First thing I noticed when I walked in the church, people were talking to each other. I said, Carl, watch this lot. They want to be here. They're talking. Just behave yourself. She said, you're in a church. Then I saw people. I said, look what they're doing now. They're hugging each other. Just behave yourself. You're in a church. And then I saw men hugging each other. I said, Coral, if a man tries to hug me, he's definitely in trouble. Just behave yourself. You're in a church. But I didn't feel comfortable. Some of you might be feeling uncomfortable right now. It's a new setting. I don't belong here. They're different sort of. Who are these people? You know, and Ben came, the leader of the church, and started the service started, and people started waving to each other. Look what they're doing now. Just behave yourself. You're in a church. Then I had a suddenly moment. Suddenly, it's like my whole body's locked up. Doom. I thought, is this it? Am I going? Perhaps I shouldn't have said those things. And I just couldn't move. I was totally locked. I thought, Coral's bound to see I'm in trouble. I'm really in trouble. What's going on? What's happening? Then I felt these tears dripping down my eyes, and I thought, I'm crying now. It's me. I'm definitely crying. But I couldn't move, and there's tears. And then something just started to well up, like it just came up and out and up and out and up and out and up and out, just pouring out of me. And I don't know how long that lasted, but I just feel it come out and come out, and pouring out with tears. And then it was over, and I just felt amazing in peace. I thought, that must be God. That must be who he is. That must be it. Don't remember anything else about the service. All I remember, when I went home, I felt wonderful. Woke up the next day, I felt wonderful. I went to work, I felt wonderful. On my way to work to London, I realized for the first time in, 4 years, I hadn't had a nightmare. First time in 4 years, bang. So that must be God. That must be him. I said to Carl, we've got to go see somebody. We went to see the pastor on the Wednesday and just told them the story I'm talking to you about today. Told him the story, and he's a small Welshman, but a big man in God. He goes, well, that's really wonderful, Noel, he said, but there's more to be added. I said, what do you mean there's more to be added? He said, you can have a brand new life in Jesus Christ. I said, really? He said, really? And he wasn't offering me a patched up old life, a brand new life. I thought, wow, if my life can be rubbed out and I can start again, why wouldn't I want that? He said, all you've got to do is recognize that the God of the Bible is the one true God. Recognize that you're a sinner. And you know, when he said that, it's like the light switched on in my head. The light switched on. I thought, I've got nothing to do. I've got nothing to do with this killing. But it's like it was illuminated, all the bad things I've done, all the bad things I've done. I thought, I can put my hand up for that. I'm guilty of that. I'll put my hand up for that. Yeah, I'm definitely that. I'll own that. I'll wear that. And he said then, that Jesus, he sent his son, Jesus Christ, as a sacrifice for your sin. And accept that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. And that he died on the cross as a sacrifice for your sin. Dethrone yourself from the center of your life. Invite Jesus to become the center of your life. And you'll be saved and have eternal security. But I was a cynic. I thought, what if I'm being conned? You know? I couldn't deny the Sunday experience. I couldn't deny the nightmares that had gone. I couldn't deny this revelation of who I was as a sinner. So I thought, I'll put it through the truth tables. I thought, okay, if I meet these conditions, if I buy into this package, my life will change. Amen? I thought, if I meet these conditions and buy into this package, and it's not true, my life won't change. It's logical, isn't it? What have I got to lose? All I had was a life that wasn't working. Coral and I simultaneously, we got on our knees, invited Jesus Christ, met those conditions into our lives. And that was the start of this journey, wonderful journey. I'm going to finish in exactly 5 minutes. Is that all right? Okay. You're not bored yet then? Okay then. So we started this journey and we learned to pray. And my prayer was, God, please vindicate me in my own lifetime. I've already been vindicated before you, but please vindicate me of this crime. That's how we prayed. And I prayed that year in and year out. And for the next 7 years, it's like God took me apart bit by bit and started to reshape and remold me as part of the person you see today. You read a lot about that in the book as well. We dared to embrace this truth. We focused on the promises of this word and appropriated them to our lives. And that became a life-changing thing. We read this instruction manual. And it was like God wiped the hard disk clean of all the bad stuff and put all the good information on it. And so I stand before you today, because I run out of time, simply to say I've been healed mentally. I've been healed emotionally. I've been healed physically. All because I dared to believe and appropriate this word to my life. And you'll read lots more of members of our family and lots more of other healings in the book Killing Time. A year after becoming a Christian, we got visited by the police. There'd been somebody killed similar to the one you were convicted of. And all this fear had returned. You'd done it once, you could do it again. But Coral kept a diary, and we were in a church meeting and 100 witnesses to say where we were. And then it happened again a couple of years later. And I went into my office and I cried. I literally cried before God and said, God, please put a full stop to this particular chapter in my own book of life. And I had this vision of I didn't have a vision. I had a dream that night. And I don't dream. I don't normally dream. And two men came to the door and handed me a newspaper. And several weeks after that happened. Somebody came to the door at 11 o'clock at night, went to the door, opened it. Two men, and one said, Noel Fellows, and he said, yes. He said, I've got something that will interest you. He hands me a newspaper. And I said, come in, your message is from God. They go, what? There were two reporters that were carrying new evidence. The headlines read, police turn up new evidence in old killing. 14 years had passed, and now this new evidence came to light. Why 14 years? This side of heaven, I'll never know. But all the questions I'd asked for 14 years suddenly are being answered, being answered, being answered, being answered. Evidence that would have released me in the first 3 hours the police had all the time. Had it in their hands all the time. But God was on the move. God was just revealing everything that needed to be revealed. And I stood before the Lord Chief Justice, Lord Lane, in the law courts in London, and the conviction was quashed and the sentence was set aside. It's been a wonderful journey. It's been a tough journey. In those early years, when you become a Christian, in those early years, some of the healing process was really painful and really hard, but God is really great. He takes a brick at a time. There's a wall. I had a wall, remember? One brick at a time. Another brick. Noel, I'll take another brick. I'll take another brick. And more and more and more that it built. I never believed I could have a life that I have today. I've got the love and dedication of a wonderful wife. I've got three daughters. I've got 6 expensive grandchildren. God's taken us all over the world just telling this story. Sometimes to a few, to a handful. Sometimes to thousands. And you think, well, why do you do it? Why would you do that? The only reason I tell this story, because it's the only story I've got, really, is this, right? If God can do it for me, He can surely do it for you. He can do it for you this morning, as He did it for me. And that's the only message I have. I haven't got any other message than that. If God can heal me, He can heal you. If God can set me free, He can set you free. If God can build a new life for me, He can build a new life for you. All of those things are there. Let's close our eyes as we close, shall we? Let's just respect everybody. That would be great. Let's close our eyes. I want to hear this morning, and I'm gone. But we started where we're finished. Let's just be really real with each other today. I don't want to leave here with anybody missing out. You might be sat there this morning thinking, I love what you've got, Noel. I'd love to start that journey. You can start that journey today with this simple prayer that we can pray together. So if you want to know Jesus Christ, you want to take that first step and give your life to Him this morning, you can. Or perhaps you made that decision some time ago as a child, as an adolescent, even as an adult, and you drifted away, you've drifted back into wrong choices, wrong decisions, back into the world's way of thinking and that compromise. And you know in your heart of hearts this morning, Father's calling you back. He's saying, come back to me, come back to me. You can come back to Him this morning. So I'm going to pray this prayer. You can pray it alongside with me. You repeat it back to me. Church will help. Okay? It says in John 8:32, you shall know the truth shall set you free. We'll start this prayer. I'll say it. You repeat it back. Just pray it out loud. Pray it in your mind. Pray it whichever way you want. Lord, thank you for the truth I've heard here this morning. Lord, thank you for the truth I've heard here this morning. I've heard you do not operate outside truth. I've heard you do not operate outside truth. You've made a way into that truth through your Son, Jesus Christ. I now recognize and acknowledge that I am a sinner. I confess my sin and repent of it and turn away from that life. I believe you are the God of the Bible, the one true God. I believe in your Son, Jesus Christ, who died for me, surrendering His life upon a cross as a sacrifice for my sin. I now dethrone myself from the center of my life. I invite you, Jesus, to enter in and be the center of my life, now and forevermore. I surrender all to you. Amen. You can just keep your eyes closed a minute. I'm not going to embarrass anybody. It's not, God doesn't want to do that. But if you prayed that prayer for the first time, just me looking, could you just raise your hand? I'm not going to call you or anything. You raise your hand. Thank you. I see that hand. See that hand? Okay. You can open your eyes. I'm going to finish with this and I'm going to let Pastor Lee take it from here, okay? Just for ministry, before you go, please don't leave if you need prayer for any of these things. We'd love to pray with you. I know Pastor Lee's got his team as well. Are you carrying the pain of the disaster that happened in your life? Have you been the victim of malicious lies? You need to be set free from that. Do you suffer from mood swings and depression? Do you live a fear-controlled life? Fear of failure, abuse, physical, emotional, sexual, fear of death? Do you easily get sucked into wrong choices and decisions that affect your lifestyle and your walk with God? Behavior, stealing, immorality, lies, deceit, all getting in the way. Remember, the way you handle the hurts of your past will always determine your future. Are you ready to jettison the masks that you hide behind? Do you really want to be healed this morning? Do you really want to be set free? Because if you want to be one of these foot soldiers, you've got to be. It's the only way forward. Amen.